Ko tarakehe te maunga ko tēnara tuaka, ko te rarawa te iwi, ko tau maui te hapu ko matiatia te marae ko Susan Reid ho. Thank you, Mark, for that very well delivered and short version of my bio. I've been at another presentation this morning and I'm going to make my bio much, much shorter in future. It's makes me whakamaa to hear it. Anyway, thank you so much to the college for this invitation. As I said, I've presented already about health literacy this morning, and I've sort of made a call about this presentation, which I may or may be wrong about. Anyway, I'm not continuing on the doom, well, not the death and doom theme of the previous two speakers. I'm a very august company, I must say. But I do want to say that as an adult educator, and particularly an adult literacy tutor for a long time, I've got a mega consumer council sitting on my shoulders. I've worked with over 1,000 adult literacy learners over the years, and when I work in health literacy, I always think, what would Rangi say, what would Shiny say, what would Sione say, and what would Pep say, and most of the time their replies would probably not be appropriate for this. Anyway, and of course I too am a health consumer. So today I spoke about health literacy and I had an hour slot, and so I could do the gentle journey from, so you think health literacy is really about your patients? Oh, let's gently move through that continuum to actually health literacy is all about health professionals and the health system. So it's quite a sort of gentle journey. Well, I've got 14 minutes I think now, and so I'm sorry, I'm taking a risk. You're not having a gentle journey, you're having a pretty much of a slam dunk. So I'm going to start off, I'm taking a risk and I want you to bear with me, but I'm going to start off by finding my presentation actually. Now, is it because? No. Is it because?
It's there. There.
I can't see it. It's always a problem. Oh, anyway, I can see this. Oh, there they are. These are my parents. They met in World War II. My father was in the Māori battalion. He was in London for the Officers Training Corps. And my mother, who worked in the War Office, was invited by her cousin, who was a vet at the London Zoo, to come and meet with some British servicemen. The cousin was right, but anyway, it turned out differently. So my mother went with her cousin. They go into this club and they walk down the stairs. My mother looked down, saw my father, he looked up, he was drinking beer out of a large tankard apparently. Their eyes met and the rest was history. And I'll explain why I'm talking about this in a minute. So when I decided about my presentation, bearing in mind I had 15 minutes, I was thinking, okay, here's my father. He was a bushman and a farmer. He was a straight up sort of guy, very practical, called a spade a spade. Actually, he called it a something shovel. He believed that if there were problems, they were there to be solved. You could solve things, no mucking around, just get it done. And on the other side, there's my mother, genteelly brought up by servants in Alexandria in Egypt. When she came to the Northern Hokianga, had no idea how to cook, sew, or do anything. Genteelly brought up, believed in manners, charm, and being polite to everyone, and whose motto in life was, from the Prince of Wales, Oniswa ki Malipons, evil be he who evil thinks, something she insisted that we followed not very well. So I'm thinking about my presentation, I'm thinking, who should I channel? My father, straight up the guts, tell it how it is, or my mother, charming, polite Susan, come on, it'll be fine, think well of people. So I've decided, after much deliberation, that it's going to be about my mother. But I can't guarantee my father won't come through from time to time. So, are you going to push the button? Thank you. Or should I? It's just that it's very disturbing because I can see James's presentation. Oh, you've done it. Thank you. I'll go back. I want to start off by saying I have a really good GP. I've had one all my life, obviously not the same one. And So I'm really lucky, I've discovered. And the reason I really like my GP is because about 2007, he took 4 appointments to find out that I had erythema nodosum. Do you know how long it's taken me to be able to say those words? It's quite hard. And on the 3rd appointment, I really liked him because he said to me, Susan, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I'm going to find out. So he referred me to a dermatologist. And then he rang me back a day later and he said, I want you to come in and see me. So on the 4th appointment, and with the help of a large medical tome, he said, I think this is what you've got. And the pictures in there were revolting. And I thought, my God, it's going to grow, you know. So I was pleased to go to the dermatologist shortly and find out that, in fact, I had sarcoidosis. So that was quite good, but that's another new word to learn how to spell. And I want to acknowledge that general practice is the engine of the health system in New Zealand, and I know you all work really hard at it. And I want to acknowledge too the difficulties of being in general practice, particularly in relation to the professional reading you have to do. I used to be a lawyer many years ago, and the best contraceptive I ever found was the stash of professional reading on my bedside table every night. It was actually just perfect. I never had to worry about the pill or anything. But having said all that, I really want to talk about, I understand too that people who get into general practice and medicine get into it because they have inbuilt intrinsic motivation to help people, unlike some lawyers who want to make a lot of money. So, having said all those things, I want to talk about a particular health literacy for health professionals and the system in a particular context. So, I'll have the next slide, thank you. So good. Right, or maybe I won't. I'll try this, shall I? Oh good, it's working. Okay, so we all know what outrage is, an extreme or shocking violation of other rights. This is from the New Zealand Oxford. But how many of you know what this is? Has anyone got a clue? I was diagnosed with it 2 weeks ago by a clinician in Auckland. She said to me, oh Susan, you've got gout rage. And this is what I've discovered it is. I've been doing research on gout now for 2 years, and I have to say, you know, people would say, well, what's gout got to do, and what's health literacy and gout got to do with primary care? And my mother and I both say quite a lot, and I'm not letting my father say anything at the moment. So, this is what happens when I've been talking to primary care. When I talk to primary care about gout, they tell me that the causes of gout are because patients do not moderate their food and drink intake. In particular, they eat too much meat, seafood, and drink too much beer. And they have cultural practices, which means they don't take care of these things. So they go to hakari or they go to feasts, and they just overindulge. And actually, the really good news is patients believe exactly the same thing. And yet we have really strong pointers of evidence that in fact this is not the case. So what we know is that gout is caused by high levels of uric acid. And what we also know, and believe me, I've had a clinical group helping me get to this division. We know that 20% only of high uric acid is caused by food and drink, and 80% is caused by the fact that your body can't actually get rid of the uric acid from your system. And this is caused often by genetic issues, by your kidneys, and by being overweight. And so what's happened is there's very strong evidence, very strong research in New Zealand that there are other things happening, and yet there is a very firm belief within primary practice and with patients, this fossilised belief that it's about food. So this is where the health literacy part comes in. Okay, so health literacy is about building the skills of patients and whānau, knowledge and skills, and the responsibility for that rests on the health system, and in this particular case, on the health professionals working in primary care. So this is what you as primary care practitioners need to do around gout. This is the knowledge and skills you need to build in your patients. You need to build in them the knowledge that in fact if they want to deal with gout, particularly if they've got chronic gout, they're going to have to take urate lowering therapy. That they're going to have to learn that when they start urate lowering therapy, they start low and slow. They'll have pain medication at the same time. They need to get regular blood tests so that they can check what their uric acid levels are and if necessary titrate the urate lowering therapy up. And they also need to know that once they reach their target of 0.36 mLs, then they'll have annual blood tests. And patients also need to know and have the skills to talk about this. They also need to know they need to have CVD checks, diabetes checks and kidney checks as well, because gout is that fantastic sentinel disease that goes tap, tap, tap on your shoulder. And for those of you who are sitting there thinking, and I know to some extent I'm preaching to the converted, sitting there thinking, oh, this is a Māori and Pacific issue. Well, it's not. I was talking to one of the rheumatologists I've been dealing with on this program, and he, I never did change this, sorry. I suffered from didn't push the button hard enough. So, my mother is saying we can do better. That was always a signal sign to us as children when she said that. The greatest inequity, it is true, is for Māori and Pacific, but for Pākehā New Zealanders, they're diagnosed with gout at 10 times the rate of white US males. So there's something going on in New Zealand about why we have such high rates of gout in our general population. So here's some tools you may not know about that can help. So some of you may know about these gout clinical pathways. They're relatively new. I was the consumer rep on a panel of people who developed them. They were developed, written mostly by Dr. Nicola Delbeth, who is very precise and careful, and they have a dosing calculator, which apparently is very useful. When I see patients now, I print them out and give them a copy of the gout clinical pathways to take to their doctors to say, do you know that these exist? Because I've decided that I'm going to create a push. The general practice should be the push in the healthcare system. Well, I'm creating a push from patients to actually go and say, could you talk to me about this, please? The other thing that I understand from talking to Gary Reynolds is there's a gout audit tool on the Doctor Info site. So to help me with my gout rage, I'm asking you for a favour. I know you're all medical professionals, so I know you want to help someone who has a long-term condition, and I've been listening to all these things about helping patients and listening to them. So bearing in mind what Ron said in Glenn Calhoun's book, I actually prefer his poem about standing upright here, the one about holding on and letting go. Anyway, it's difficult to do that with gout. So please listen to me and hear me and be clear what I'm saying. When you go back to work next week, could you please ask someone in your practice to do an audit of your gout patients? Could you check to see how many of them are on urate lowering therapy? Could you please check to see how many of them have been on non-steroidals for quite a long time? And for those who've resisted urate lowering therapy, or those who have taken urate lowering therapy and had a massive gout attack and said they're never going to do it again, don't give up on them. Get them back in and have a talk to them and say, look, we'll try again, we'll do it differently, we'll make sure you have the pain medicine on board. Because that's the health literacy that I'm talking about, and the health literacy that I want you to take on board and take away with you. So I have one final slide. When we talk about literacy and illiteracy in New Zealand, we talk about poor unfortunates, people who can't read and write. And I want to actually destroy that myth. Most people in New Zealand, the majority of people can read and write some stuff. What they struggle with reading and writing is complex material and reading and writing unfamiliar material, which of course, you know, is exactly what happens in the health sector. So when we talk about people who are illiterate, to me there's no such thing, because people will always be able to do a little bit of something. So I like this quote because it presumes that everyone is going to have some degree of literacy. So I would like to offer help with your relearning, unlearning and learning. And please, I have resources that we've developed on the Gout project. If you want to contact me, I'm very, very happy to share those if they're of interest to you. And I want to once again acknowledge that I know how difficult the work you do is, and I know too how hard you work and how hard it is sometimes to maintain the bigger picture. That good old quote that I used in workplaces so often, you know, when you're up to your arse in alligators, it's really, really difficult to remember your job was to drain the swamp. I'm sorry, that was my father coming through. So I would like to thank you so much to the college for this opportunity to talk with you today. My mother thanks you, and my father says let's get on and do it. So kia ora.